War was not funny. It didn't bother me very much. I noticed that, it was kind of, to us kids, watching the German soldiers march with their metal-studded boots. But then we went back to school, and slowly things started to happen.
All right, we have been through many inspiring and moving stories, but this young lady, her story is pretty rarely told. A woman who defied all odds, broke through barriers, and left a lasting legacy. That's Caecilia Antonia Maria for you. In a time when the world seemed set in its ways, she stepped up with a vision and a drive that turned challenges into opportunities. Her story is more than about historical dates and events. It's a riveting journey of resilience and innovation. In this video, we take a look at why her incredible story, a story that has inspired the world and a story that is hardly talked about. All right, get yourself a coffee and let's get started. Caecilia Antonia Maria Lutz was born in the quaint town of Haarlem, Netherlands, on a crisp autumn day in 1903. The leaves were turning amber and gold, dancing in the wind like a celestial ballet, as if nature itself was celebrating the arrival of a child destined for greatness. Haarlem, with its cobblestone streets and Gothic architecture, was a place steeped in history. Yet the birth of Caecilia would add a new chapter, one that would be remembered for generations to come. From a young age, Caecilia exhibited a deep empathy for others. As the youngest of 5 children in a devout Catholic family, she was often seen following her mother, Maria, as they delivered baskets of food and clothing to the poor. Maria, a woman of unwavering faith, instilled in Caecilia the belief that every life was sacred, and that one's purpose was to serve those less fortunate. It was in these formative years that the seed of compassion took root in Caecilia's heart. She watched as her mother wiped the tears of a grieving widow, held the hand of a sick child, and offered words of comfort to those who had lost everything. Caecilia absorbed these moments, understanding that kindness was not just a virtue but a calling. As she grew older, Caecilia's sense of justice blossomed. She could not bear to see the inequities that plagued her society. The First World War had left Europe in ruins, and the Spanish flu pandemic had ravaged the population. Caecilia, though still a child, was deeply affected by the suffering around her. The sight of orphans begging on the streets, their eyes hollow with despair, haunted her dreams. She vowed that one day she would dedicate her life to protecting the innocent. In 1939, as the dark clouds of the Second World War gathered over Europe, Caecilia was working as a schoolteacher in Amsterdam. She had chosen this profession not just to educate, but to nurture the souls of her students. Her classroom was a sanctuary, a place where children felt safe and loved. But the war, with its relentless march, would soon challenge everything she held dear. When the Germans invaded the Netherlands in 1940, life as Caecilia knew it changed overnight. The occupation brought with it an atmosphere of fear and oppression. The Jewish community, once an integral part of Dutch society, became the target of brutal persecution. Caecilia, like many others, was horrified by the atrocities being committed. She could not stand idly by as innocent lives were torn apart by hatred. It was during this time that Caecilia was approached by a member of the Dutch resistance. They knew of her reputation as a compassionate and courageous woman, and they believed she could be of great help in their efforts to save Jewish children from deportation. The task was dangerous, and the consequences of getting caught were severe. But Caecilia did not hesitate. She agreed to join the resistance, fully aware that this decision could cost her life. Caecilia quickly became a key figure in the underground network that helped smuggle Jewish children to safety. Using her position as a schoolteacher, she was able to forge documents and create false identities for the children. She would then arrange for them to be taken to safe houses, where they could hide until they could be transported to more secure locations in the countryside. The work was fraught with danger. The Gestapo were ruthless in their pursuit of those aiding the Jews. Caecilia had to constantly be on guard, knowing that one mistake could lead to her capture and execution. Yet, despite the risks, she never wavered in her commitment. The thought of the children, terrified, alone, and at the mercy of the Germans, gave her the strength to continue. Each rescue operation was a test of nerves. Caecilia would meet with the children in secret locations, often in the dead of night. She would comfort them, assure them that they would be safe, and then hand them over to members of the resistance who would take them to their next hiding place. The children, some as young as 3 or 4, looked up at her with eyes filled with fear and trust. Caecilia became more than just a rescuer. She became their protector, their guardian angel. The underground network operated in secrecy, but it was not immune to betrayal. In the winter of 1943, one of the members of the resistance was captured by the Gestapo. Under torture, he revealed the names of several key operatives, including Caecilia. The news sent shockwaves through the network. Caecilia knew that her time was running out. Determined to save as many children as possible before the Gestapo closed in, Caecilia intensified her efforts. She worked tirelessly, often going without sleep for days on end, but the Gestapo was closing in. One night, as she was preparing to smuggle a group of children out of Amsterdam, the safe house was raided. Caecilia managed to escape, but the children were captured. It was a devastating blow. The guilt of not being able to save them weighed heavily on her heart. Despite the loss, Caecilia knew she could not give up. She went into hiding, moving from place to place, always staying one step ahead of the Gestapo. The war had taken everything from her home, her friends, her freedom. But it could not take away her resolve. She continued to work with the resistance, coordinating rescue missions from the shadows. As the war dragged on, the tide began to turn in favor of the Allies. In 1944, the Netherlands was liberated, and the Germans' occupation came to an end. Caecilia, who had spent the last few years living in constant fear, finally saw a glimmer of hope. The children she had saved, many of whom had been taken to the countryside, began to return to Amsterdam. The city, though scarred by the horrors of war, was slowly coming back to life. Caecilia was reunited with some of the children she had saved. They were older now, but they had not forgotten the woman who had risked everything to protect them. They called her Mama Lutz, a name that filled her heart with both joy and sorrow. For every child she had saved, there were others she could not reach. The memory of those lost haunted her, a constant reminder of the brutality of the war. In the years following the war, Caecilia dedicated herself to helping the children rebuild their lives. She opened a school for war orphans, a place where they could receive an education and find a sense of normalcy. The school became a beacon of hope for many, a symbol of resilience in the face of unimaginable adversity. Caecilia's efforts did not go unnoticed. In 1965, she was recognized by Yad Vashem, the World Holocaust Remembrance Center in Israel, as one of the righteous among the nations, a title given to non-Jews who risked their lives to save Jews during the Holocaust. The ceremony, held in Jerusalem, was a solemn occasion. Caecilia, now in her 60s, stood before a crowd of survivors and their families, her heart heavy with the memories of those she had lost. But it was not the recognition that mattered to her. What mattered was that the children she had saved had lived. They had grown up, started families, and built lives of their own. They were her legacy, a testament to the power of compassion and courage in the face of evil. Caecilia continued to live in Amsterdam, spending her days surrounded by the children who had become her family. She never married, nor had children of her own, but she found fulfillment in the lives she had touched. She would often sit by the window of her small apartment, watching the world go by, content in the knowledge that she had made a difference. Caecilia Antonia Maria Lutz passed away in 1986 at the age of 83. Her final moments was a quiet one, much like her life after the war. She was buried in a simple grave in the city she had called home for most of her life. Her funeral was attended by many of the children she had saved, now grown with families of their own. They came to pay their respects to the woman who had given them a second chance at life. Today, the name Caecilia Antonia Maria Lutz is known to few outside of the Netherlands, but her impact is felt by many. The children she saved went on to live full lives, carrying with them the lessons of courage and kindness that she had imparted. Her story has been passed down through generations, a tale of heroism and humanity that continues to resonate. In Haarlem, a small plaque marks the house where she was born. It reads, "Here lived Caecilia Antonia Maria Lutz, who during the Second World War saved the lives of countless." It was the dead of winter in 1943, a time when the streets of Amsterdam were cloaked in fear. The German occupation had turned the city into a labyrinth of danger, where a wrong turn or a misplaced word could mean doom. Caecilia Antonia Maria Lutz, a schoolteacher by day and a member of the Dutch resistance by night, had grown accustomed to the risks. But nothing could have prepared her for the urgent message that arrived one frigid evening. A fellow resistance member burst into the small, dimly lit room where Caecilia was reviewing forged documents. His face was pale, his breath short. "They've found the children," he gasped. "We have less than 2 hours before the Gestapo arrives." Caecilia's mind raced. The children he spoke of were 8 Jewish orphans, hidden in a cellar beneath a condemned building on the outskirts of the city. They were waiting for new identities, new lives, but time had run out. The Gestapo had somehow learned of their location, and a raid was imminent. Without hesitation, Caecilia devised a plan. She contacted 2 trusted members of the resistance, both known for their resourcefulness and bravery. They quickly secured a small, inconspicuous van. The plan was simple: reach the cellar, extract the children, and drive them out of Amsterdam before the Gestapo could seal off the city. The risks were monumental. The city was under strict curfew, and German patrols roamed the streets. Any encounter with soldiers could end in disaster, but Caecilia knew there was no other choice. The journey to the cellar was tense. The streets of Amsterdam, usually bustling even in wartime, were eerily silent. The sound of the van's engine seemed deafening as they navigated through the narrow, winding streets. At one point, they were forced to stop as a patrol passed by. Caecilia held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. The seconds stretched into what felt like hours until the patrol moved on, oblivious to the van's occupants. When they finally reached the building, Caecilia and her companions hurried inside. The cellar door was hidden beneath a pile of rubble, a precaution against discovery. Inside, they found the children huddled together, their eyes wide with fear. The youngest, a girl no older than 3, clung to a worn-out doll. Caecilia knelt beside her, offering a warm, reassuring smile despite the urgency of the situation. "You're safe now," she whispered, though she knew they were far from it. The children were quickly but gently ushered into the van. Caecilia wrapped them in blankets, trying to shield them from the bitter cold. As the van pulled away from the building, she prayed silently for their safe passage. The drive out of Amsterdam was fraught with peril. Every intersection, every shadow was a potential threat. Caecilia kept her eyes on the road, her mind calculating possible escape routes if they were stopped. As they approached a checkpoint on the city's outskirts, the tension inside the van became palpable. Caecilia had prepared for this. She had crafted a story that she hoped would hold up under scrutiny. When the German officer approached the van, she greeted him with a calm, authoritative tone. "We are transporting sick children to a hospital in the countryside," she explained, presenting forged documents that identified her as a nurse. The officer peered into the van, his eyes narrowing as he scrutinized the children's pale faces. Caecilia held her breath, knowing that the slightest hint of doubt could unravel everything. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the officer nodded and waved them through. As the van crossed the city limits and the open countryside came into view, Caecilia allowed herself a small sigh of relief. They had made it. The children would be taken to a safe house in a remote village, where they would be cared for until they could be smuggled out of the country. The midnight rescue became one of Caecilia's most celebrated missions, a testament to her quick thinking and unyielding resolve. The children she saved went on to live full lives, many of them unaware of the narrow escape that had changed their fate. For Caecilia, the success of the mission was bittersweet. She had saved these children, but there were many others she could not reach. The thought of them haunted her, driving her to continue her work with even greater determination. It was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there were those who risked everything to protect the innocent. In the midst of war-torn Amsterdam, where the sounds of bombs and gunfire were a daily reality, there was one place where silence reigned supreme. This was the Silent School, a secret refuge for Jewish children who had been orphaned by the war. The school was the brainchild of Caecilia Antonia Maria Lutz, who, after seeing the devastation wrought by the Germans, felt compelled to create a sanctuary for the youngest victims of the Holocaust. The school operated under the guise of an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. To the outside world, it was a dilapidated structure, of no interest to anyone, but within its walls, a miracle was taking place. Here, Children who had lost everything were given a chance to reclaim their lives. The idea for the silent school was born out of necessity. As the war dragged on, the number of orphaned Jewish children grew. These children, traumatized and alone, were vulnerable to the horrors of the Third Reich. Already deeply involved in the resistance, knew she had to do something. She began by gathering a small group of like-minded individuals, teachers, caregivers, and resistance fighters, who shared her vision. The location was chosen for its strategic advantages. The warehouse was located near a network of tunnels that had been used by smugglers in years past. These tunnels provided an escape route in case of a raid. The building itself was fortified with hidden rooms and secret passages designed to protect the children at all costs. Caecilia personally oversaw the transformation of the warehouse. She worked tirelessly, day and night, to ensure that it was ready to serve as a school. Classrooms were set up in the most secure parts of the building, and every effort was made to create a sense of normalcy for the children. They were taught reading, writing, mathematics, and most importantly, hope. The silent school earned its name not just because it operated in secrecy, but because of the solemnity that pervaded its halls. The children who came here had lost their families, their homes, and their sense of security. Many of them had witnessed unspeakable horrors. They arrived at the school shell-shocked, silent, and withdrawn. Caecilia understood that these children needed more than just an education. They needed healing. She created an environment where they could begin to recover from the trauma they had endured. The teachers were instructed to be patient, to understand that these children might not speak, might not even respond at first. But with time, and with love, they would find their voices again. One of the most poignant aspects of life at the silent school was the nightly routine. Every evening, before the children went to bed, Caecilia would gather them together and tell them stories. These were not just fairy tales, but stories of courage and resilience, tales of people who had faced great adversity and had triumphed. Through these stories, Caecilia sought to inspire the children, to show them that even in the darkest of times, there was hope. The children responded to this environment in different ways. Some began to speak again, their voices hesitant but growing stronger each day. Others found solace in art or music, expressing themselves in ways that words could not. Slowly, the silence that had gripped the school began to lift, replaced by the sound of laughter, of children being children again. But the silent school was always under threat. The Gestapo, ever vigilant, had begun to suspect that something was amiss in the warehouse district. Caecilia knew that it was only a matter of time before they would come knocking. To prepare, she and her team conducted regular drills with the children, teaching them how to hide, how to stay silent if the unthinkable happened. One day, that unthinkable scenario became a reality. A German patrol, acting on a tip from an informant, arrived at the warehouse. Caecilia, who had been out gathering supplies, returned to find the patrol trucks parked outside the building. Her heart raced as she realized what was happening. Inside, the teachers had already moved the children into the hidden rooms. The patrol, led by a suspicious officer, began to search the premises. Caecilia entered the building through one of the hidden tunnels and made her way to the secret passages. She could hear the heavy boots of the soldiers above her, the sound of furniture being overturned as they searched for evidence of resistance activity. As the soldiers approached one of the hidden rooms, where a group of the youngest children were hiding, Caecilia knew she had to act. In a daring move, she emerged from the shadows and confronted the officer. She had prepared a cover story, a false identity that painted her as a simple caretaker of the abandoned warehouse, with no knowledge of any illegal activities. Caecilia Antonia Maria's bravery during wartime stands as a real powerful testament to her character and resilience. Her role in saving Jewish children during one of history's darkest periods is a story that not only highlights her heroism, but also underscores the immense challenges she faced. Amid the chaos and brutality of war, Caecilia found herself at a crossroads where moral courage and personal risk converged. The world around her was engulfed in conflict, with hatred and persecution rampant. For many, the war's horrors were overwhelming, creating an environment where standing up against injustice could lead to severe consequences. Yet Caecilia chose to act, demonstrating a level of bravery that went far beyond ordinary measures. The task of rescuing Jewish children during this period was fraught with danger and difficulty. The Third Reich's policies were not just oppressive, but brutally efficient in their attempts to eradicate entire communities. Every step Caecilia took was shrouded in risk, from clandestine operations to covertly moving children to safety. She had to navigate a landscape of constant surveillance and potential betrayal, where even the slightest misstep could lead to devastating repercussions, not just for her, but for the children she sought to protect. Enduring the emotional and psychological strain of such a mission was another monumental challenge. Imagine the weight of knowing that the lives of innocent children depended on your actions. The pressure of maintaining secrecy, while constantly fearing for her own safety and that of the children, added layers of stress that few can fully comprehend. Each rescue operation was a high-stakes gamble, with every successful escape a triumph over the surrounding terror. Caecilia's courage was not just about physical risk, but also about the emotional toll of her actions. The trauma of war, combined with the continuous stress of hiding and protecting these vulnerable lives, would have been an immense burden. Despite this, she remained steadfast, driven by a deep sense of moral responsibility and compassion. Her ability to maintain hope and determination in such trying conditions speaks volumes about her inner strength and commitment. Her fame following these acts of bravery came as a recognition of her extraordinary efforts, but it also marked a period of intense scrutiny and public attention. The aftermath of such heroism often includes a spotlight that can be as overwhelming as the danger faced during the mission itself. The challenge of transitioning from the shadows of secrecy to public acclaim required navigating complex emotions and responses from the world around her. Caecilia's story is a powerful reminder of what it means to stand firm in the face of immense danger and adversity. Her actions during the war exemplify the profound impact one individual can have by choosing to act with unwavering courage and compassion. She endured not only the physical risks, but also the emotional and psychological challenges of her time, all while maintaining a resolute commitment to saving lives. Her legacy endures as a beacon of hope and a powerful testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity. During a time when humanity seemed to be at its lowest, with the war casting a long shadow over every aspect of life, Caecilia's actions were a lifeline to those who were most vulnerable. Her ability to navigate the treacherous terrain of wartime Europe, filled with its pervasive fear and cruelty, showcased a rare blend of bravery and compassion that was nothing short of revolutionary. Each child she saved represented a victory over the oppressive forces that sought to erase their existence, turning individual acts of courage into a collective testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Caecilia's resolve never wavered, even as the stakes grew ever higher. Her story unfolded against a backdrop of widespread devastation, where every decision she made carried the weight of life and doom. The broader context of the war, with its sweeping atrocities and relentless violence, highlights the magnitude of her bravery. In a time when many chose to turn away or remain silent, Caecilia chose to stand firm, driven by an unyielding sense of justice and empathy.